Greetings, comrades. This is actually a video specifically for user Alien1Tau9, who sent me quite a long message, which, to be honest, I'm not really going to have time to sit down and write something as extensively back as you've written to me, unfortunately. But so what I'm just going to do is kind of go through some of the main points and kind of give my reactions. Now you begin your message by saying that a key component of the mixture of the movements within the Occupy movement is essentially right libertarians. This is probably true in the US. The whole concept of libertarianism is not... I wouldn't say it's particularly in the European consciousness. It's certainly not in Britain. There are kind of... I suppose there are kind of nationalist libertarian parties, but just, you know, it takes a very different form than it does in America. I mean, it's mostly, those parties focus mostly around kind of cultural issues like immigration and multiculturalism, how they treat gays, you know, how kind of hate speech laws and stuff like that. Well, kind of, yeah, basically advocating the sort of the free market, but there isn't this sort of focus on liberty, as it were. That's very much an American thing. We don't so much have that here. I wouldn't necessarily say that the, you know, right libertarian ideas may be prominent within the Occupy movement, but ideas rather than self-identifying right libertarians, I would say those people would be more likely to be found at a Tea Party rally or something like that. From what I basically understand, the Occupy movement are viewed as a bunch of commies and lefties. Even though that's not necessarily quite true, it's much more so than in Britain. In Britain, a great deal of the mixture is sort of single issue groups, environmental groups, animal rights groups. You get your Trotskyists trying to edge in, all that kind of stuff. Your usual kind of bunch of art student-y hippies and liberals, but basically Labour left of there, so sort of social democratic is kind of what we've got here, and that's the major vibe in the rest of Europe as well, in Greece and Spain. It's sort of on the social democratic side, whilst of course, you know, there are plenty of communists and anarchists. Now, I would say that here in Europe, the whole, like I say, libertarianism isn't really in the common lexicon here, but that whole kind of range of ideology is still very much associated with the anarchists. And they're pretty numerous over here. It's really, because they don't organise in the traditional way that obviously Marxists do. It's hard to get out a figure, but I would say there's quite a sizable anarchist movement around in Britain, but just because of the way they tend to organise or not organise, they don't really make their presence particularly felt beyond the odd black bloc, which I don't view as being particularly positive. I once did, but I don't anymore. Well, yeah, naturally, the kind of the US concept of what the US is very much rooted in kind of the right wing, and I think the kind of the whole mentality behind this was pretty well summed up by is it Ann Coulter, her name is, the horrible right wing American fascist woman, and she made a quote about what was it? She said, like, you know, the French Revolution, Republican Revolution, was kind of sort of the crazy left wing revolution, and the American Revolution was rooted in the sensible ideas of the right. Was how she viewed it. I think in the mind of many of an American that's probably true. what I think we have with the kind of sort of right libertarian petty bourgeois ideas drifting into the thoughts of this is basically just nervousness about Marxism and its connotations and anti-capitalism. The kind of people aren't really. People tend to not think particularly outside of capitalism. They think of capitalism or the Soviet Union or Pol Pot, basically. And a lot of people, even on the left, a lot of people still do that. And I think that's why the anarchists probably haven't made themselves particularly well felt in America. In Europe, it's a different story. Due to the much, we've always had a reasonably vibrant anarchist movement here, so I think that's probably associated it with that. So, I mean, that's the struggle against reactionary ideas rooted in the right, and so while they have these petty bourgeois ideas, conversely at the same time they're probably struggling against them themselves. So, the big government thing, again, that's not really an issue in Europe. Well, in Europe, what people are talking about is whether or not their government's independent from the EU. I mean, we have big government here. We had social democracy. We don't anymore, but we got the European nanny state. That's what we have here. So there isn't really a question about kind of a big government or minarchism down here. So, a lot of these perspectives are kind of hard, I don't have my finger in them because, it's not something I'm really exposed to in debate. But the whole big government idea, I mean, the impression we get, especially in Britain, is that it was actually Gordon Brown, kind of embracing free market ideas which led to the crisis in Europe. And that, the impression is that if Gordon Brown had done a proper job of regulating the markets properly, then perhaps it wouldn't have collapsed. I mean, maybe it still would have. Things wouldn't have gone exactly the way they had. Ron Paul, I think you're overstating his kind of popularity. I wouldn't say he has outstanding popularity. He has a following, but at the end of the day, it's America, and people vote much the way they do in Britain in a kind of protectionist way, and I think a lot of people, while they may sympathise with some of his ideas, aren't going to vote for him against kind of a stronger opposition candidate. I don't think he'll get in anytime soon. I don't think it's a good idea if he did, from his perspective, if he got in, because what we're coming up to, another massive recession is around the corner, and I don't think anyone sensible really wants to be at the helm of that vehicle when it's going, unless Obama really thinks he can sort it out. And I guess the whole view of the state being the epitome of tyranny and totalitarianism and encroachment on individual liberties, I think that comes out of the Cold War, and also America's history of being a colonial item or possession of Britain in the past. I think that's basically where that comes from. I don't think a lot of the Occupy people don't take that seriously. They're into their green utopias. Let's see. Federal Reserve. Yeah, I agree with all your arguments against anarchist capitalism and stateless libertarianism. I think those are good, solid arguments. And yeah, I pretty much agree with all that, and I think you just have to, it's going through capital, basically. I still hold that's what we need to do. I mean, a lot of people just simply do not understand how the economy works, who do not understand capitalism as it is. And what I think is important is that a lot of people do not have a materialistic view of their part in the world. I don't mean, for those who don't know the Marxist definition of materialism. Materialism, as opposed to idealism, materialism means everything is pretty much rooted on material, solid things. There's no invisible hand of the market. There's no kind of external force. Everything's connected. Everything affects us, and we affect everything. We're in the world. We have an active part in the world. I did a video a while ago kind of promoting a book on dialectical materialism, which came out in the height of Stalinism, but it's still pretty good as a beginner's guide. So I'd recommend that, and I believe there's a link to it in my About Me section on my profile page, so you can go and have a look at that. But anyway, back to Alien1Tau9. They have an idealistic view of how capitalism is. They view capitalism and the economy as being like the weather, as this external thing that they as individuals are not really connected to. It happens around them. And, you know, that's what we have to kind of dispel, really. This kind of, that, you know, the economy and capitalism is an objective force that they, as individuals or collectively as a class, have no effect over. And also the kind of, you know, the anti-politics of the Occupy movement. You know, this kind of real need to avoid discussing politics or, you know, adhering to any kind of politic, you know, in the name of keeping unity. And that's bullshit. You know, in fact, this should be a centre of discussion for politics. And yes, definitely thinking beyond Republican, Democrat, Conservative, Labour, whatever. You know, kind of beyond that, but actually talking about political theories and political action. And really going through this and discussing it, not hiding from it. Because there are right and wrong positions, and we can't this movement can't embrace them all and achieve anything. That's why people think it's vague, because it isn't picking a side. It's just, oh, the bankers are bad, capitalism isn't working properly, you know, we're having a hard time, you know, the 99%, and stuff like that. And yeah, so, you know, it's a struggle. Like I say, I think it's what Lenin said, you know, patiently explain. And this I adhere to. And like I say, you know, you obviously have a very good understanding of capitalism and, you know, a very good critique of anarcho-capitalism, which I may steal from you, if you do not mind. It's worth noting as a side note, I don't consider myself to be a libertarian. And neither a left libertarian or anything else, you know, because I believe, if I may make an assumption, that you're a Luxemburgist. I have a lot of respect for Rosa Luxemburg, but I lean more towards Lenin. I'm a Leninist. I'm not a Stalinist. I don't really consider myself to be a Trotskyist either. I guess you might call me an orthodox Leninist, but I don't consider myself to be that orthodox either, because I think Lenin made a lot of mistakes that are easy to point out in hindsight, but from where he was, possibly seemed like the right thing to do. But that's the subject for another video. I'll talk, I know this is a bit inadequate, you know, I just wanted to kind of address the sort of the main points that you gave me, and if you keep hassling me with messages, I'll sit down and I'll write something properly eventually. It's going to be difficult. Next month I might not have more than going on the internet perhaps once a month or something like that. Sorry, once a week. So we'll see how that goes. And I'm going to make another video, and this will be addressing the second part. So for everyone who doesn't know what the fuck I'm talking about, I will somehow post this letter, because it's worth reading. So if that's okay with you, I'll send you a message and ask you this. So I'll work something out. But anyway, red salutes, comrades. Look out for part 2.